Welcome back to the Hope, Helping Our People Elevate, the channel where we dive into untold stories and the truths that shaped our history and still impact us today. If you're new here, welcome to the community. And to our returning viewers, thank you for your continued support and dedication to these important conversations. In today's episode, we're going to uncover the dark legacy of the Code Noir, or modern day black codes, issued by King Louis XIV of France in 1685, and how it was set the foundation for the black codes of 1724 in Louisiana, which is where King Louis got Louisiana is named after King Louis. But we'll also explore how these oppressive laws were later mirrored and adopted across the United States, creating systems of control that stretched far beyond slavery into the Reconstruction era and beyond. The connection between the Code Noir and the Black Codes is a critical piece of history that explains how oppression was institutionalized and adapted over time. So let's get ready to dig deep and elevate our understanding of this often overlooked legacy. Peace and love, family.
On behalf of Akuno Senko for Bay, you know what I'm saying? Jay, where you at? We're trying to help our people elevate. Hope. H.O.P.E. We're giving them hope. We doing what we gotta do, you know. Every day, one step at a time, man. We gonna make it happen. Helping our people elevate. Yeah. Sometimes I practice focus, thought, and meditate. I'm trying to come with other ways to help our people elevate and seeking knowledge, make me levitate. The lifted mental state is what results from how we orchestrate. This for the family's sake. Let's self-reflect and self-evaluate. And every day, make sure the steps you take, you calculate. Receive a master's fate. I know I can't exist without the hate, but that's okay. I balance that with higher self today. Success is on this way, and after that, my flesh can pass away.
So we'll start with slavery in the French colonies, the Code Noir, or the Black Codes of 1685. The Black Codes tell us a very long story that started in Versailles at the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King, in March of 1685 and ended in Paris in April 1848 under Arago at the beginning of the ephemeral Second Republic. In a few pages, with the aridity that benefits the seriousness of law, it tells us the life and death of those who in fact do not have a history. In a 5-dozen article, it marks the roads that are followed by hundreds of thousands of millions of men, women, and children whose destiny should have been to leave no trace for their passing from birth to death. The first paragraph of the Black Codes of the Ordeal of Canaan by Louis Solomon Mullins perfectly conveys the substance of the Black Codes. I first reviewed the Black Codes a few years ago when I helped a reader. The Law Library owns a 1742 edition that is a part of our rare book collection. I do not know much about it and wished to study it when I found time. Thankfully, this blog gives me the opportunity to do so. Although published 2 years after his death, the Black Code is usually attributed, at least in spirit, to John Baptiste Colbert, the famous minister of Louis XIV. Colbert, known as a great financier, the founder of the French Navy, and the reorganizer of French commerce and industry, was also a remarkable jurist, as noted in the book Great Jurist of the World. He was at the origin of the codifying ordinances adopted during the reign of Louis XIV, such as the Civil Ordinance, the Criminal Ordinance, the Commerce Ordinance, and the Navy Ordinance. The Colonial Ordinance of 1685, best known as the Black Codes, was one of the last to be prepared during his ministry and may have been completed by his son, Marquis de Seignelay. Although subsequent decrees modified some of the provisions, the gist of the codes remained in place until 1848. The Code's 60 articles regulated the life, death, purchase, religion, and treatment of slaves by their masters in all French colonies. It prohibited masters from making their slaves work on Sundays and religious holidays. It required the slaves be clothed and fed and taken care of when sick. It prohibited slaves from owning property and stated they had no legal capacity. It also governed their marriages, their burials, their punishment, and their conditions they had to meet in order to gain their freedom. Although some may have seen the Black Codes as an improvement over existing laws at the time, many condemned it in a very strong term. Voltaire wrote that the Black Codes only served to show that the legal scholars consulted by King Louis had no ideas regarding human rights. Robert Giacomo, a French attorney, called the Black Codes a crime against humanity in his book, The Black Codes, Autopsies of a Crime Against Humanity. Solomon Mullins, who taught political philosophy at the University of Toulouse and at the University of Paris-Sorbonne, referred to it as the most monstrous legal documents of modern times and only a weak barrier to the master's tyranny. Slavery was abolished in France on February 4th, 1794. The decree stated, the convention declared the slavery of the blacks abolished in all colonies. Subsequently, all men irrespective of color living in the colonies are French citizens and shall enjoy all the rights provided by the Constitution. Unfortunately, none of the implementing measures were taken, and slavery was reinstated by a decree of July 16, 1802, It was definitively abolished by a decree on April 27th of 1848 on the initiative of Victor Schuyler. The Black Code had remained in force for 163 years. Something I wanted to show y'all right here was from the Missouri State Archives, but where it's highlighted in 1724, in March 1724, King Louis of France issued an edict concerning the Negro slaves in Louisiana. Like I said, Louisiana was named after King Louis. So these codes were named the Black Codes or the Code Noir. It says this code continued under the Spanish regime and fixed the legal status of slaves, imposed rules upon their owners, and defined the legality of free people of color. The codes detail regulations about holidays, marriages, religious instructions, burials, clothing, punishment, and manumism of enslaved, as well as proper conduct of free persons of color in the colony. And so then we'll dive into a few of these articles or a few of these codes inside these articles. So now I want to end it with the 1724 Louisiana Code Noir. And as I read the articles, I want y'all to know that I don't know Roman numerals, so I'm not going to read the numbers in Roman numeral, but I will read the articles. So we're going to end it with these articles, and make sure y'all let me know y'all thoughts in the comment section. It says the primary documents were to regulate relations between slaves and colonists. The Louisiana Code Noir, or slave codes, based largely on that compiled in 1685 for the French Caribbean colonies, was introduced in 1724 and remained in force until the United States took possession of Louisiana in 1803. Again, Louisiana was named after King Louis, and so these codes existed in Louisiana until, as it said, the United States took possession of Louisiana in 1803. If y'all know about the Louisiana Purchase, it wasn't just one state that was purchased, it was 13 states. The Code's 54 articles regulated the statuses of slaves and free blacks, as well as relations between masters and slaves. And so, as it keeps saying, or continue to say, so-called free blacks, but letting you know that all melanated people were not enslaved during this time frame. But it says that the entire body of laws were appear below. And so, the black codes, let me give y'all an example of black codes. When you get pulled over by a policy enforcer or a so-called police officer, and they say, oh, we have a black male code, white male code, that's the black codes. As soon as they say black male or black female and they hit a code behind it, you go into these black codes. The first one says decrees of expulsion of Jews from the colony. So why would you want to remove the Jews from the colony? The second one says make it imperative on masters to impart religious instructions on their slaves. What religion do all so-called black people follow without knowing its origin? The third one permits the exercise of Roman Catholic creed only. Every other mode of worship is prohibited. If you ever watched any slave movie, you'll see where they were beaten if they worship anything outside of the Christianity. When they honored and prayed to their ancestors or our ancestors, and they did their so-called voodoo, or as they called it, witch magic or whatever, that was prohibited. That was forbidden. It wasn't allowed. And so only thing was allowed was the so-called Christian creed, the Roman Catholic creed. Negroes placed under the direction or supervision of any other person than a Catholic are liable for confiscation. Think about that. So why was it that you had to be under these Catholic people, or you would be kidnapped? They could take you. Sundays and holidays are to be strictly observed. All Negroes found at work on these days are to be confiscated. Think about it. Then it says, we forbid our white subjects of both sexes to marry with the blacks under the penalty of being fined and subjugated to some other arbitrary punishment. We forbid all curates, priests, or missionaries of our secular or regular clergy, and even our chaplains in our Navy to sanction such marriages. We also forbid all our white subjects and even the manumitted or freeborn blacks to live in a state of concubinage with blacks. Should there be any issues from this kind of intercourse, it is our will that the person so offending and the masters of the slave should pay a fine of 300 livres. Should said issues be the result of concubinage of the master with his slave, said master should not only pay the fine, but be deprived of the slave and of the children, who shall be adjudicated to the hospital of the locality, and said slave shall be forever incapable of being set free. So, if the master slept with the slave and got her pregnant, they got movies like this. It was a movie Halle Berry played, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but she got mistreated by both sides. But anyway, and there's other movies, Mandingo. But when situations like this happen, this is why they couldn't claim the child. They had to let the slave or someone on the field think that it was their child, because if they found out, they had to pay a fine, the child would be taken, and then that slave would be a slave forever. They would never be set free. But this should illicit intercourse have existed between a free black and his slave, when said free black had no legitimate wife, and should said black marry said slave according to the form prescribed by the church, said slave shall be thereby set free, and the children shall also become free and legitimate. And in such a case, there shall be no application of the penalties mentioned in the present article. The ceremonies and forms prescribed by the Ordinance of Blois and by the Edict of 1639 for marriages shall be observed by both with regard for free persons and to slaves. But the consent of the father and mother of the slave is not necessary. That of the master shall be the only one required. So this goes back to when they were giving children away or just giving the wife away. You could be married to a person, and you could be a male, you married to a woman, and they would just give your wife to another person, and it didn't matter what you said or your father or parents said. It was all about what the master wanted to do. It didn't matter how you felt or anything. We forbid all curates to proceed to effect marriages between slaves without proof of the consent of their masters, and we also forbid all masters to force their slaves into any marriage against their will. Children issued from the marriage of slaves shall follow the conditions of their parents, and shall belong to the masters of the wife and not to the husband, if the husband and wife have different masters. As we say in today's time, the mother has rights over the child. That's where this comes from, the dividing of the families and the so-called black homes. I mean, any homes really, but this goes back to these slave codes. Regardless if you call yourself black, white, whatever, here in the United States, you're still a prisoner to this system. We're all slaves in this system. So this applies to everyone. If the husband be a slave and the wife be a free woman, it is our will that their children of whatever sex they may be shall share the same condition of their mother and be as free as she, notwithstanding the servitude of their father. And if the father be free and the mother is a slave, the children shall all be slaves. Again, so it's all based on the mother. If the mother's free, the children free. If the mother's a slave, then the children are slaves. It didn't matter about the father. They didn't give a damn about the male. They don't give a damn about the male. Masters shall have their children slaves buried in the consecrated grounds. Where do you think the burial come from? We burying our people on the ground now. That wasn't how our ancestors honored their ancestors. They didn't bury them in the ground. We forbid slaves to carry offensive weapons or heavy sticks under the penalty of being whipped and of having said weapon confiscated for the benefit of the person seizing the same. An exception is made for those slaves who are sent to hunting or a shooting by their masters and who carried with them a written permission to that effect or are designated by some known mark or badge. So why do you think we need a gun license, a hunting license, a fishing license? Like I just said, everybody is a slave. Don't matter what so-called color you call yourself. No human being on this planet is a crayon color. Or how do you have tens of thousands of people thinking that their skin tone and complexion is black and white when you can look in the mirror and clearly see there's no one's black or white? We forbid slaves belonging to different masters to gather in crowds either by day or by night under the pretext of a wedding or for any other cause, either at the dwelling or on the grounds of one of their masters or elsewhere, and much less on the highways or in the secluded places under the penalties of corporal punishment, which shall not be less than the whip. Why do you think they pull you over when there's multiple so-called blacks in a vehicle? Why do you think they like to jump out on us when we're in the apartments or the projects and we're so-called deep? It's more than 3 of us. Because they forbid slaves from gathering in crowds either by day or by night. And what's the punishment? And it says highway. So, I mean, come on. I mean, we're talking about the policy enforcers. They are enforcing these slave policies, these slave codes. In case of frequent offenses of any kind, the offender shall be branded with the mark of the flower de luce, and should be the aggravating circumstances, capital punishment may be applied at the discretion of our judges. We command all our subjects, be they the officers or not, to seize all such offenders, to arrest and conduct them to prison, although there should be no judgment against them. I don't think y'all know what the flower de luce is, do y'all? I want to show y'all one of America's favorite football teams that honor this flower. This is an image of the flower de luce, as they said. This look familiar to y'all? We see this all the time on y'all favorite football teams. And as you see this one right here, right in Louisiana, you see this symbol, the flower de luce. Then it says, masters who shall be convicted of having permitted or tolerated such gatherings as aforesaid, composed of other slaves than their own, shall be sentenced individually to indemnify their neighbors for the damages occasioned by the said gatherings, and to pay for the first time a fine of 30 livres, and double that sum on the reputations of the offense. We forbid Negroes to sell commodities, provisions, or produce of any kind without the written permission of their masters or without wearing their known marks or badges. And any persons purchasing anything from Negroes in violence of this article shall be sentenced to pay a fine of 1,500 livres. Whichever number these is in Roman numerals, y'all that know these, help me out. Y'all know what this number is. But it says it provides a length for the clothing of slaves and for their substances. Slaves who shall be not properly fed, clad, and provided for by their masters may give information thereof to the Attorney General of the Superior Council or to all the other officers of justice of the inferior jurisdiction, and may put the written exposure of their wrongs into their hands, upon which information and ex officio, should the information come from another quarter, the Attorney General shall prosecute said master without charging any cost to the complainants. It is our will that this regulation be observed in all accusations for crimes or barbarous and inhumane treatments brought by slaves against their masters. I was going to read all of this, but I'm going to go ahead and leave a link in the description for y'all to go ahead and check it out. But I do want to say thank you for watching this episode of Hope, helping our people elevate. I hope today's deep dive into the Code Noir and its connection to the Black Code of 1724 have given you a new insight into the systems that shaped our history and continue to affect us today. If you found this video enlightening, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can keep uncovering truths and elevating our community. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and keep helping our people elevate. Peace and love, family.